Good evening. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Councillor Barbara Blake. I'm the chair of this committee and I'm a Seven Sisters Ward councillor. So if we can have introductions, please, starting with the vice chair on my left and then the first row of the committee.
Hello, Councillor Reg Rice, member for Tottenham Hill and chair of the vice chair of this committee, sorry.
Councillor Luke Foley Harrison, Crouch End Ward.
Councillor Lester Buxton, Crouch End Ward.
Councillor Yvonne Say, White Hart Lane.
Councillor Alex Worrell, Stroud Green.
Councillor John Bevan, Northumberland Park.
Councillor Ajda Ovet, Northumberland Park.
Mark White, Councillor for Tottenham Central.
Councillor George Dunstall, Stroud Green.
Thank you very much. And if the officers can introduce themselves, starting on my left, please.
Jack Booth, Principal Committee Coordinator.
Justin Farley, Legal Advisor.
Rob Szosowski, Assistant Director for Planning, Building Standards and Sustainability.
Robbie McKnocker, Head of Development Management and Planning Enforcement.
James Mead, Senior Planning Officer.
And I think we've got some officers over there.
Fiona Ray, Acting Committees Manager.
Philip Elliott, Principal Planning Officer.
Tanya Skelly, Deputy Team Leader.
Mark Chan, Senior Planning Officer.
Thank you. Okay, so and other officers will introduce themselves whenever relevant. So this meeting is being recorded. All registered speakers should be aware that they will be recorded for live or subsequent broadcast via the council's internet site or by anyone attending the meeting. Members and speakers are requested to note the information set out at item 2 on the agenda, and this is the planning protocol, so please note that. Item 3, we have apologies from Councillor Nicola Bartlett. We have no items, there are no items of urgent business. And we're now on to declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest, please? No, okay, thank you. So we are now on to the first substantive item. This is Highgate School, North Road, London. It's pages 1 to 80 and the proposals which are set out in the pack, so I won't read those out. But I will hand over to the planning officers, Tanya Skelly and James Mead, to introduce the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a pre-application scheme for various redevelopments, improvements and enhancements of the school facilities at Highgate School. Developments are proposed across 6 sites in total. These sites are spread across the senior school campus in Highgate Village, the Bishopswood Road campus and the Farfield on Hampstead Lane. It's anticipated that 6 separate planning applications will be submitted, 1 for each of the development proposals. The school have been engaging in pre-application discussions with officers for a number of years. The 6 sites all fall within site allocation SA41, which explains that options for the enhancement of the school's facilities should be further explored. In 2021, the council adopted the Highgate School supplementary planning document. which will be an important material consideration for any future planning applications. This supplementary planning document expands on the site allocation's broad policy base and sets out development guidelines for any future proposals. In early 2022, 4 of the pre-application schemes were presented to the Quality Review Panel, and the feedback from panel members was broadly supportive. The Development Management Forum was held on the 19th of October 2022, and the main issues raised by residents are summarised in the pre-application report. The 6 sites are all within the Highgate Conservation Area, and several buildings on the senior school campus are Grade 2 listed. Parts of the Bishopswood Road campus and the Farfield are designated as Metropolitan Open Land. The sites are also situated within the Highgate Neighbourhood Plan area. Therefore, the future schemes will be assessed against the Highgate Neighbourhood Plan, the SPD, the London Plan and the local plan policies. Members' feedback is now being sought at this stage to inform the submission of detailed planning applications in the upcoming months. I'll now hand over to the applicant team, who will present the proposals and who will be able to answer any questions. Thank you.
So the applicant team, you have 15 minutes to present your proposals. Thank you. Sorry, you do. You have extra time, 40 minutes.
Thank you. That's a relief. We'll just bring up the presentation. Sorry. Thank you. So this slide just presents a brief summary in terms of the 6 different projects that we're bringing forward along with a temporary decant facility. As officers have mentioned, they're mainly focused around 2 sites, the Island site at the senior school at the top of Highgate Hill and the Bishopswood Road campus. And we've got the architects here today to take us through those schemes in sequence.
Could that screen be located in front? Everybody bending their necks to see it.
Right, so
Sorry?
Can the screen be moved slightly? Can we pull it forward? Would that help? Councillor Rice, maybe?
That's good. That's worse.
You get on your laptop.
You get it. Oh, I can.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Can the committee? Can you see it, or if not, can you relocate yourselves so that you can see it? Apologies. Yes. Okay. Is that all right? And Councillor Rice, you can see it on screen.
I can see you and all that.
I know you. Thank you. Thank you. Right, over to the applicant. Apologies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much and good evening. The science project for Highgate School is intending to refurbish and modernise an existing building that was built in 1928. You can see it in the site plan, shaded orange. It's the L-shaped building and it sits in the middle of the North Road campus of the school. In this view, you can see it at the front. The building sits alongside Southwood Lane, and there are 2 courtyards associated with the science block. The science quad on the left-hand side, the south, and the Ghana quad on the right-hand side, which is the north. In these plans, the existing buildings are shown in red and the extensions in yellow. So as well as the refurbishment and internal alterations to the existing building, there are 2 modest extensions proposed. The southern one to Science Quad provides accessibility and inclusivity to a building that currently does not have that. The extension will provide a new main entrance, a Part M compliant lift, and new generous stairs, as well as showers for staff cyclists in the basement. On the northern side, at this level, there's a small extension for administrative offices with an external cloister. The typical upper floor has this repeating pattern with the stairs and lift in the southern quad carrying on up. And then on the northern side, there is additional space for laboratories. The main purpose of this is that the existing laboratories are either way too large or way too small. And in order to provide for the science curriculum moving into the future, they need a greater number of medium-sized laboratories. And that the extension allows them to do that, as well as combined with alterations inside. At roof level, it's mainly an existing roof. There's a glass roof over the entrance extension, a small area for plant, which is screened, and that is intended to provide a location for air source heat pumps in order to provide a more sustainable building driven by electricity. And there's also a small observatory. Over the course of 4 or 5 years, we've had detailed discussions with planning and conservation officers. We've moved from the more abstract elevation on the left-hand side to the right-hand side, which is an architectural composition which perhaps fits in more responsively to the existing historic and listed buildings. And this is a view of the science quad with the new extension center to that. On the northern side, this small extension is on a side that used to be the rear side of the science quad, but because the school's entrance has now been shifted to the north side, this approach has much more importance, and hence the composition of this elevation. Seen from the Ghana quad, you can see the projecting fins, which give increased privacy to the almshouses on the left-hand side. And you can just see the small observatory at roof level. This is the view from Southwood Lane. You can just see the extension over the tops of the roofs and the observatory above. And then the main view from the village end, which is the south gable wall of science and the new extension on the left-hand side, mainly glazed with brise soleil. The scheme is accompanied by extensive landscaping intended to restore the quadrangle feeling of these courts. And that's also repeated on the northern Ghana side. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. I'm going to talk to you about Dine House, which is on the opposite side of Southwood Lane from Ed's building. This is a 1960s building, and the whole kind of area behind it leads down to the Highgate Bowl. It's in an ever increasingly dilapidated state, but when we studied it right at the beginning, what we realized is size and proportion that won't really support planning in classrooms, standard classrooms. It will support sixth form classroom spaces, which are smaller. So the whole proposal is to keep the frame of the existing building and all its embodied carbon that's involved in that. We're keeping an auditorium which is built a couple of decades ago, which is in a decent state of repair. But you can see the site from the bottom. It is a series of dilapidating buildings, including an exterior swimming pool, and then the parade ground at the moment is at the bottom. There is really quite a kind of neglected, if you like, area, with all of the circulation from across the site going through that externally through that path on the right-hand side that you can see. So this is a ground floor plan. You can see how deep the site is. Southwood Lane is on the left there. The idea at the moment, it's a sort of chaotic tarmac car park onto Southwood Lane. The idea is that becomes a new garden. From when we began the project, we've peeled back an extension on the front, which is in white there. The existing building is in blue. So it now is really quite a minimal new porch, which is a double height space that gives you sort of proper access and accessible access to the auditorium, which is to the brown rectangle to the right of the blue main sixth form centre. 2 accessible car parking spaces. So the whole of the front of the kind of the way the building addresses Southwood Lane is significantly improved. The back of the site we really conceived as a series of landscape gardens to kind of keep the idea of extend the idea of greenery across the site. So the building steps down with a series of flat roofs, a series of landscape spaces. Only a couple of them are actually accessible, and where they are accessible, we've used planting at the edge, which is not accessible, so that you can only occupy the centre of the of each roof terrace that is accessible, so that actually overlooking between the site and the neighbours is actually improved by this scheme in relation to the current condition. This is how it plays out. The pink is Dine House on the left. That's all sixth form spaces. The auditorium you can see is in brown there. We've kept two significant gaps in the development. So in the middle is a sort of rethought garden space, and then you can see how the building sort of steps down in a series of sort of connected blocks. And you can just about see there the green lines, which are the existing building profiles across the site, compared to the new architecture of these staggered building blocks going down from down the slope, keeping greenery, keeping that kind of route through. And there's just one lower connection between the front buildings and the buildings towards the bottom of the site, which allows for accessible internal circulation. So again, the circulation has gone from the sort of outside of the building, adjacent to the neighbouring boundary, to the inside in the centre, and is obviously we've now turned this whole site into one that's fully accessible. This is the extension and the recladding that we're recladding the building, brickwork, a sort of language of lightweight stone and glazing. There's the new garden in the forecourt, and the idea of picking up on the rhythm of the chapel and the listed buildings across Southwood Lane with this kind of brickwork and stone architecture. And looking back the other way, we're transforming that kind of sad parade ground into this green active space that will bring kind of life and activity all the way down the site. And you can sort of see there this kind of relatively simple architecture of these split up blocks, which reduces the sort of the idea of kind of any notion of kind of the building being one big development, really. Lots of consultation, design review forums and so forth. Main feedback last time was about this front elevation. Could we bring some more articulation to the lift shaft? That's changed from originally it was a fully glazed lift shaft. Now it's fully clad in stone, and again we kind of introduced a finer grain to the stonework so that you could enable some kind of architectural dialogue to happen between the new building and the existing. So right opposite, currently there's a tunnel from the main site, from Ed's Science Building across underneath the road, which is not, I mean, it's not fit for purpose really. The kids do use it, but actually it's too steep and it's very, very crowded. So this little project was about doing the right thing for the listed buildings on the island site, tackling the staircase, which is the little rectangle there on the right, rethinking that to bring accessibility to 3 levels of the existing buildings, plus safe accessibility across under Southwood Lane. At the same time, removing this kind of unfortunate toilet block from that corner and kind of releasing that whole side and flank of the existing building. So we put a little lift and a stair in, going down to the lower tunnel level and up through the ground floor to the first floor. So the first time ever, this brings fully accessible routes across Southwood Lane and actually to 3 of the existing buildings on the left-hand side of that site. So there's the existing gates, they stop, and then you have the toilet block, and you can only see the front of the existing building. And this is the sort of look no hands kind of transformation of that, taking the toilet block away, re-providing the toilets at basement level. So you now see the return flank of Big School there, which I think is really, really important. And then this quite modest little kind of arcade that also deals with getting waste and rubbish, having a store for that undercover, not out in the open, which it currently is. We've also kind of extended the language, nice language of brick piers and stone across all the way of the frontage of the site to Big School on the left-hand side. The third project we've been involved in is Richard's Music Centre, which is 10 minutes walk away down the lanes. There's a back route between this site and the main school, which gives safe but extended access for pupils and staff to move from one site to the other. So this building demolishes, and again, two buildings which are shown there on the upper row, which are not fit for purpose in terms of their floor layouts, their ceiling heights and their accessibility. And in front of the building, it's currently used as a car park. At the back of the building on the bottom row there, it's really not very kind of well. I mean, it's in a dilapidating state and needs to be kind of something needs to be done about it really. So the idea of this building, like Downhouse, the design and ambition for this building has shrunk considerably since when we started work on it five years ago. It was a big triangular building close to its boundaries on the right and on the bottom there. We've pulled it away from the boundary. We've pulled it away from the line of trees, which are really a really important backdrop to the main games field as you're coming from the top left of that plan, coming down Bishopswood Road. So now we're away from all the root canopy, and we can preserve that line of trees, and our building sort of sits in front of that. Addressing there's a small path you can see between our building and the main games area, and that's the route that the children come from to get safely from this campus of buildings down here, round the backlands and up to the main school, 10 minutes walk away. So the curricular kind of choice for this building had to be something that kids could do double lessons in, because it's 10 minutes walk away from the main site. So this building is on the left. It's really two buildings in one. On the left-hand side is a sports teachers kind of area and changing rooms on the basement. And on the right-hand side is drama. So there's a double height studio theatre there. That the only way to keep this building within sort of existing building lines and respect rights of light was to bury this double height drama space into the ground, so it extends down into the basement. This is the top floor where there's dance studios that have kind of great windows looking out over the games pitch, and then there's a central foyer that splits the building into these two parts for sports on the one hand and drama on the other. And then on the lower floor, buried into the ground, is the bottom floor of the studio theatre. And on the left-hand side is all the changing areas for people, the students going onto the sports pitch, which has its own. Just in the top left there, there's a little staircase that takes them directly from changing out onto the sports field. Worked really hard to keep the mass of the building down. Again, you can just see the green lines of the existing buildings. We're actually lower than them, and on the top left you can see how we've actually pulled our building away from the neighbouring boundary. Building has two very different characters. On the top is the elevation onto the sports pitch, which is much more open and glazed. At the bottom there are brick niches which kids can sit in and meet as they're waiting to play sport or indeed watch sport. And on the back, it's much more solid to prevent any kind of overlooking to the neighbouring residential properties. And that's a view of the sports pitch with those kind of niches to sort of meet and greet and watch sport. The foyer in the middle, and then the kind of studio spaces on the first floor. Again, pretty positive feedback at the recent design review forum. It was felt that we should do a little bit more to address the building frontage onto Bishopswood Road, which we've now done. We've stopped the railings off, the existing railings in front of the building, and created a new set of landscape railings in front of our building, increased the window presence. That central rectangle is a school coat of arms. So the building now does have a sort of proper presence, we feel, onto the street.
Thank you. The Mallinson Sports Centre started with a swimming pool in 1969, which is the block that you can see in the center of those 3 blocks. That has recently been refurbished by the school. Just to the south of that, to the right, is a sports hall gym, and then there are interconnecting changing rooms between. On the northern part of the site, to the left, is a 5s court and a squash court. So the aim of the project is to bring these facilities up to scratch to meet the new sports curriculum. It was designed for a smaller population of all boys, and now the school has expanded that population and has girls and boys. So there is a much wider diversity of sports spaces needed, and in particular, the school needs to have a second sports hall. We identified the northern part of the site as the best place to do that by demolishing the 5s and squash courts. The 5s, we felt, could move to the southern part of the site where you see the blank wall of the sports hall. And we felt in this way it would help the whole building to engage with the external sports facilities and grounds. So the concept was to keep the best parts of the existing building, but to wrap new building all the way around it. And at the end of that process, it will be a single, coordinated and integrated development on the site. As well as the building, there's another part of the application is some works to the sports ground to the east, which is to the top of the drawing shown as the oval, which I'll come back to later. Running quickly through the plans, the aim with the sports hall, which is located on the northern end of the site, is to sink it down 1 story into the ground in order to minimize the impact of the building above ground. And you can see dotted there the outline of the existing retained building. As you move up the levels, the plans are relatively complicated looking. The existing building is shown in orange with all extensions shown in yellow. But the concept is very simple. It's to keep this existing building, which in itself has a negative influence on the conservation area, and to completely wrap it with new development, and by doing that, to raise the quality and presence of this building in this locality. In this drawing, you can see the sports hall then on the left-hand side at the upper level, and on the right-hand side, the new 5s courts. Because of the slope of the land, which is dropping 4 meters from right to left, these 5s courts are substantially at basement level also, so they have very little impact on the space around. They sit within an area of metropolitan open land, but it is only the roof that will really be visible there. As you move up through the building, there are teaching accommodations on the left-hand side and extensions that run all the way along Bishopswood Road frontage to provide more gyms and studios and better connectivity. This is also a building that at the moment has no disabled access internally, and our new extensions and alterations will bring full inclusivity and accessibility. As well as that, by wrapping the whole development around with new, we're significantly increasing the sustainability of the building itself. At roof level, there are green roofs combined with roofs combined with photovoltaic panels, and that includes panels being fitted onto existing roofs as well. The concept of the design has always been very much to integrate it within the architecture of this area of interest and the residential buildings around. The form of the building has been broken down into much smaller elements in order to improve the scale of it in relation to the Victorian villas around. And this has created this more diverse composition of stairs and lift towers combined with the larger elements of construction. The elevation on the bottom is towards Broadlands Road, and you can see there how the scale of that sits comfortably next to the existing residential neighbour. The elevation at the top here is the elevation facing the sports pitches. Part of the intention here was to turn the entrance, which currently has a very narrow approach off Bishopswood Road, and to have it facing the sports pitches and across the pitches towards the RMC project. So there is a dialogue across the open space between these two new projects. The section below shows you how the building has been set into the ground in order to reduce the volume above ground. Again, we've had consultations with the Haringey officers for 4 or 5 years on this, and this is where we started with presentations in 2018. And these have moved on now to here, which is the view of the entrance facing towards Metropolitan Open Land and towards the sports pitches, with the 5 courts on the right-hand side, just an open frame with a green roof above. And then looking down on the left, you can see how this varied composition of volumes creates a similar sort of townscape that you will see in Highgate looking down the hill there. This is the view at the important junction of Bishopswood Road coming down to meet Broadlands Road. Currently not really celebrated as an urban corner, but I think the composition of our building and the way that our building responds to the street lines and the alignments of adjacent buildings will really reinforce this as a particular place within the locality. The scheme is supported by really extensive landscaping, particularly around the public sides, all around the perimeter. And just to return to the sports pitch on the east of the project that I mentioned, our technical research revealed that there were flooding issues at the northern end of the site, not just with the Highgate School site, but also with residential sites and the public street beyond. So the purpose of this, this sports pitch, by creating a basin, it will take up flood water for rainfall events over the next century, and it will serve to improve the flooding conditions that exist at the moment, both for the school site and for neighbouring sites. Thank you.
So next, we're going to talk very briefly about the decant facility. The slide on, please. Thank you. Just got one slide on this project. So to facilitate the various different components of the estate plan, the school requires space within which it can decant for a temporary period to enable the works to go ahead. In partnership with the council, we've undertaken quite a detailed site search to review where the most or the least sensitive locations would be. And the conclusion has been that the existing Muga at Bishopswood Road is that location. And there are 2 key reasons for that. The first one is that it's relatively divorced from residential properties, the closest one being beyond existing buildings, the Richard Music Centre. And the second reason being that the existing AstroTurf surface is coming to the end of its life and is shortly due for replacement. But it also means that we've already got the pad foundations that are needed to lay those buildings, so that there's inherently a more sustainable approach. I appreciate it's quite hard to see on this image here, but you've got some visualizations of what the decant facility will look like when it's in place. And the existing Muga is actually sunken as well, so the impact is lessened as a result of that also. And in the bottom left there, you can see the temporary junior school buildings, the school constructed elsewhere within the estate between 2014 and 2016. And you can just see the quality of that, although it's a temporary facility. But most importantly, I think if you visit the site today, you wouldn't have any clue that it had been there. So the restoration of that site has been quite seamless. And then finally, just to touch on Farfield. Farfield is a site that's removed from Bishopswood Road. So we're on Hampstead Lane here at the junction with the Bishops Avenue. And it's an existing playing field that the school uses principally in the summer. They've got significant issues in the winter period with waterlogging, which means that the frequency of use is really quite minimal. The proposal is to improve the drainage of the pitch and to replace the grass surface with an all-weather synthetic surface. What we're not doing is we're not putting in permanent lines, so it's literally just a green Astro surface that would be marked up as though it were an ordinary playing field. we're also not installing any kind of boundary treatment, so we're trying to maintain the existing kind of open aesthetic of the site. There will be some slight regrading, and where that happens, we're proposing to put natural grass plateaus and new perimeter seating around as a result of the level changes. The existing changing block, which is to the north of the site, is to be retained and refurbished. There'll be no increase in floor space within that building. It's just they're all internal works to make sure that the building is up to standard. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, any questions or comments? I've got CouncillorOvat first. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you for the presentation. Just one question. The Quality Review Panel recommended that further analysis of the potential for overheating in the Science Court extension be looked into. They've asked for an analysis of that. Would that be looked into, or has that been looked into?
Yes, I believe our engineers have looked at that aspect of it since the QRP panel. Yes, yes.
Any more, Councillor Bevan?
Yeah, at the Development Management Forum, some of the residents were really concerned that you would be increasing your student numbers substantially with all these extra works. And I think they were concerned about the, for want of a better word, the disruption of when all the students come and go. Can you give an answer to that question, whether you would be increasing your student capacity?
Thank you. Yes. So there are 1,930 children in the school at the moment, and our license from the Department for Education is 1,970. And I know it's really difficult for residents to believe that a school would invest this significantly without needing a return on income. But there is no intent to increase the size of the school for a number of reasons. This is about modernising and refurbishing existing buildings which are reaching the end of their life or are no longer appropriate for use. The other facilities we have, the circulation spaces, the dining spaces and so on, are at the limit. They are right for what we've got, but we couldn't make them any more, and we're not asking to increase any of those. So this is to accommodate the current pupil population in the school. And that's a question that I've been very happy to hear, and we've been explaining that to the local community, that is the intention. So it's not designed to increase the capacity of the school at all.
Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. So I think two of the big issues areas that you'll probably be looking at are the impact on metropolitan open land and development on that, and then obviously the conservation side of things. I'm trying to kind of piece together both from the report and what you're saying about exactly the encroachment on the metropolitan open land, because it kind of gives you a suggestion that it's minimal, but I can't create, maybe if you can point to a diagram or a map exactly where that is, what that looks like and how big that is. And I appreciate that I'll need to go to the GLA, etc. And then on the conservation front, maybe you can just talk us through the engagement that you've had with the CAC and with the neighbourhood forum as well.
Thank you. I'll start with the MOL. Apologies, it's really difficult to see with the screen that we've got. But the principal incursion is in relation to the Richards Music Centre. And if we could just skip back to that slide. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, as we're going past the MSc, we'll talk about that on the way past. So on this diagram here, the right-hand side of the orange block that is appearing on the drawing, as you can see it. So the white area, that is within metropolitan open land. As Ed explained during the presentation, those are sunk into the ground deliberately to maintain views through the Fives courts, which are effectively kind of covered sunken courts. So and so as a sporting, firstly as a sporting use, there are exceptions to MOL policy to inappropriate development. So that's the first point. And then the second point is that you still maintain the view through, and you can just see that on this visualization here. And we have worked closely with the JLA to kind of work through the arguments and the policy position in respect of MOL at MSC. Turning to RMC, which is the other side, if you like, of the existing sports pitch. I think if you go to the next drawing, I'm hoping we've got the ground. That's the one. Sorry. Unhelpfully, it's not actually shown on this image, but what we, as part of the submission, obviously we'll have a full pack that shows you the exact incursion into the MOL. Through our neighbourhood engagement, we were asked to twist the building round in a number of degrees, which is actually brought, it's kind of, because the line runs diagonally across, it kind of almost follows the line of trees that you can see at the bottom end there. So there is an incursion as a result of the Richards Music Centre. We're putting forward a justification that that's not inappropriate for a number of reasons. One, we don't believe it actually impacts the openness of the MOL at that point. The facility increases the opportunity for sport because it includes changing provision. And we're also going to rely on information from previously within the school estate where MOL has been re-released. So when you net those out, actually there's more MOL currently as a result of the junior school development than there was when the MOL was originally designated. Hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, I think the GLA tends to look a little bit more favourably if the construction material is considered temporary, even if it's questionable how temporary it is. So it looks like on this one, that's just part of the building. So it's not really, you know, you're extending into it as part of the building work that you're doing. On the other one, is that the same principle that you are actually doing proper construction work? Yeah, okay, fine. Okay, that answers that. And then on the conservation or the engagement front.
So, well, I mean, we will be submitting with the application a very detailed statement of community involvement, which sets out the extensive engagement that we've had with the community, the CAC and the forum. I've personally been involved in the project since 2015. The school have been working on it since prior to my involvement. So I'm hoping that you'll be satisfied that we've gone at great lengths to engage, and indeed the brief has changed as a result of that. So as we alluded to in the presentation, the buildings have shrunk in direct response to the feedback that we've had, and components of the brief have moved between the various buildings as well. And we'll set out the full kind of story and narrative of that within the application.
I've got Councillor Rice, then Councillor Say. So Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. This school had at one stage, I know it had an Army Cadet Corps, which in itself necessitated a parade square. Is these facilities still at that school? If not, what use of the parade square being put to?
Yes, we still have a cadet force, but it's no longer of a size which means that it needs to use the entire cadet at the parade ground. It's really a bit of a misnomer now to call that the parade ground. In the days when the entire school, all 600, 700 pupils used to come out on a Tuesday afternoon, literally to parade. So we do have about 100 to 110 pupils in the cadet force, but they're not using that space. So the parade ground is the open space at the lowest part of Dine House, which is used as a play space by the pupils during their breaks and lunch times.
Thank you, Councillor Say.
Yeah, I'm interested that you're with the buildings, you're modernising and future-proofing the school buildings, which is all really good, but you're proposing to install AstroTurf to a large area. Now, to me, that's not environmentally sustainable. It's very damaging for the environment, but damaging for invertebrates that live in the ground. You're covering essentially a large area of ground with plastic. I'm wondering if there's any other alternative you can consider.
The principal kind of reason for the scheme is to increase the frequency that we can use that site as it stands at the moment in the winter. Much of it is muddy. It's not possible to be used, and it kind of has a long-term and lasting kind of damage on the soil quality if it's overused. I think what we're also doing is that we're demonstrating that throughout the estate there will be an overall net gain in biodiversity, and we're also submitting comprehensive sustainability information across all of the projects. And I think we're also going to provide some work to demonstrate exactly what the impact in terms of the specific product is as well that's being used in terms of this surface that we're proposing.
Councillor Worrell.
Thank you. Just 2 points. So I saw that to sort of justify building on MOL, it requires very special circumstances to be met. So I just wondered if you could kind of briefly summarise why you think this meets very special circumstances. And then my other point was just on wider community benefits. I note that in the supplementary planning document, there's sort of reference to discussions that could be had about, potential community access. Just wondered if that's something you're amenable to, if you've had kind of arrangements like that in the past, which have worked well. Those 2 points. Thank you.
I'll start off as Adam at the head. Talk about the community use. We've engaged quite a lot with community users and particularly other schools. We're very conscious that in anything we do, we want to make sure that there's an offsetting of what local residents feel versus what the community feels. And there's been quite a lot of discussion about the amount of traffic that extra events cause. So by taking the theatre and drama side of things down to Bishop's Road, where we are more of our own neighbours, we think that facility could be quite easily used by local community, local schools, providing another theatre space and drama rehearsal space without increasing too much noise pollution or whatever, particularly because things are underground. On Southwood Lane, the music facilities being further down, they're not going to create ambient noise, but obviously people coming to the events as they do currently, we need to be careful. So we haven't got a plan to monetize the use of the new buildings or the refurbished buildings. We are very open to community use, particularly of where perhaps an event outgrows the current use. So whether it's in the village, some of the facilities are quite small. So we are very open to that. And then the use by other schools of our facilities, particularly the sporting ones, we're very open to that. It's a matter, obviously, for transport. I think it's probably in the primary school environment that we see that most. The most local schools being able to come most closely. We do have quite a lot of sports events already. So one of the things we see working well is when smaller primary schools want to hold sporting tournaments, but their own facilities are good and are extensive enough for their own children to play sport, but not to have away fixtures on. And we saw quite a lot last Saturday, the Saturday before, Tuesday before that, where 100, 150 children are coming forward and doing quite a lot of sport all at one go in the school day. So therefore not creating more noise at other times.
And I'll pick up the point on the MOL. So our starting position that it's not inappropriate development. So in that context, we don't. The policy doesn't require a very special circumstances test to be set out, and that's mainly because of the, as I was explaining, it provides additional sporting opportunity and without having an impact on the openness. And we'll set out the information to kind of demonstrate that to you in the application. That said, we do recognise that another judgment could be reached in terms of whether it is or isn't inappropriate development. So we will have a very special circumstances case as part of the scheme. And sitting at the heart of that is the need and the need for modernisation, the need to have a flexible curriculum, and the fact that the current estate doesn't allow for that. And that's kind of the groundwork for that is set out within the SPD. And then in addition is the community use point, which you just kind of pick up on there as well. So that's also part of our overall very special circumstances justification.
Okay, thank you. So are there any last Questions? Comments? Councillor Rice.
Yeah, I didn't hear properly, if I heard at all, the canteen arrangements. Will you like to repeat them? It's not very easy in this hall to hear what's being said most of the time. What are the decant arrangements, please?
Decant.
To the decant
Decant.
arrangements.
So the proposal is that we have a temporary facility at the Bishopswood Road, Muga, the existing sports field. And that would be, it would take approximately half of that sports field. And it would be there for the duration of the projects. And the layout of the internal arrangement of those modular buildings would revise or would change as, so for example, during science, they would be laid out as labs, and as other projects come forward, they'd be laid out as general teaching space. And one of the key reasons that we've selected that site is that it's relatively divorced from residential properties. It's also relatively divorced from the key listed buildings within the estate, so it has a lesser heritage impact. And then the second kind of key consideration in choosing the site is the fact that we've already got an existing foundation there, and so that there is kind of an inherently a lower embodied carbon as a result of not needing further temporary foundations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm going to bring this to a close now, as there's no more questions or comments. So thank you very much to the applicants. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So we're now on to item 8, and this is 505 to 511 Archway Road, London. It's pages 81 to 112 in the pack. And it's the redevelopment of an existing car wash site to provide 60 new homes for council rent. I'll hand over to Mark Chan to introduce this report. Thank you, Mark.
Good evening, Chair. This is a pre-application briefing for members for a redevelopment of an existing car wash site to provide 16 new homes for council rent, comprising a Part 3, Part 4-storey apartment building fronting Archway Road, and also 2 houses fronting Bakers Lane with associated refuse, and recycling and cycle stores, amenity space, and landscaping. There will also be a provision of 1 on-street wheelchair accessible parking space and service lay-by on Archway Road. For members' context, the site is located on the corner of Archway Road and Bakers Lane and sits on the edge of the Highgate Conservation Area. The existing car wash building occupying the site is part single and part two-story in height and irregular shaped in form. There is a row of terraced residential properties on the southwestern side of the site and a petrol station on the northwest. Opposite the side is 460 to 470 Archway Road, which is identified as site allocation SA38. This is currently used as a builder's yard and is designated for having the potential for major mixed-use development, including residential and employment use. The scheme has been reviewed by the Quality Review Panel twice, who are supportive of the scheme. Their written comments from June this year are attached in the appendix at the end of the report in the agenda. The latest written comments from October this year has been added to the addendum. The development team has undertaken its own public consultations with local amenity groups, Highgate Society, Highgate Neighbourhood Forum, and Highgate CAC, as well as consultation with local residents. Further pre-app consultations is to take place, and a development management forum is scheduled for December this year. The residential scheme is now at a stage in the pre-application process where it is appropriate for the development team to now present it to members tonight for comments and questions. I will now hand over to the development team who will present the proposals and who will be able to answer any questions you have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chair. I'm Jack Gould from the Council's Housing Delivery Team. Sitting next to me is Zebra Adrangi from Newground Architects, the project architects, and Martin Cowie, our planning consultant. The scheme has been designed to be fully council social rented. Members will be aware that the site sits in what is known as the Wellington Gyratory, that piece of road that comes around the Archway Road up Bakers Lane and around again. Following some very detailed public consultation, including quite a lot of engagement with the Highgate societies, we approached TfL to discuss the possibility with them of making some rearrangement of the Wellington Gyratory in response to comments received from local residents. TfL have made it clear that that is not currently in their contemplation, it's not in their budget, and it's not in any one of their forthcoming proposals. We are keeping very close tabs on it, and we believe that there's nothing in the design that you see in front of you this evening that will prevent that happening as and when TfL relent. I'm now going to hand over to Zeba to introduce the detailed architectural elements of the scheme.
Well, this site actually needs very little introduction to anyone who comes or goes. Can you hear me? Okay, sorry. I was going to say this site doesn't need very much introduction. Anyone who is coming and going out of North London would be familiar with it. The two first pages are talking about the engagement that we've had with the planning officers and the QRP. And the design, as you see and as I'll be presenting, is actually taking on board the comments that were made by the QRP in June. And we've had more recent engagement with them, and the comments was received end of October. So we will continue to take those on board, but as you see, there isn't, we haven't yet done so, and then we will continue to do so between now and submitting for planning. I've actually included I've included the comments that were received in October, and generally very supportive, as you'll see. As mentioned, the site doesn't need much introduction. It's a rather challenging site, but also quite an exciting site to be involved with, because it will be seen, it will transform this area so much. The gyratory is here, and then we are right at the bottom right-hand corner in the south section of it. I am with a longer frontage to Archway Road and a short frontage on Baker's Lane. Highly accessible, tube stations nearby, and bus route, cycling, and generally has promised to be developed and provide much needed housing. The immediate context, as you can see, the buildings generally two-story, and there isn't very much of any value on the site itself. The car wash box is a sort of quite a large volume with no openings, hardly anything in it, and it doesn't really contribute anything to the area at all. This shows it in context. You know, the site is well within reach of shops, services, amenities on Archway Road, lots of very high quality open green space nearby. And generally, it has the potential to become part of what lies to its south and to its west, become a continuation of a very pleasant and well-developed residential environment, restoring some of the existing grain. It is located in a conservation area just at the north sort of extreme edge of it, but as mentioned, there's nothing of any value in it on the site itself. But it is a sensitive site, and as Jack mentioned, there's been a considerable amount of discussion with the local groups to make sure that what is put in here will be a positive contribution. And where we've got the kind of inspiration for how we've developed the design is very much local context. Archway Road itself has a very mixed sort of architectural language. What is common is the sort of vertical element, vertical emphasis to buildings, no matter how tall or the general height is 2 or 3 story for houses, 3 or 4 story blocks of flats, mansion blocks, and 1 or 2 even taller buildings. And general sort of language is red brick, mix of masonry and gables, and individual sort of ownerships are very clearly evident in some way or another. I'll come back to this. This is probably more relevant once we've seen what we are proposing. But we've been also inspired by the kind of blocks of flats that were walk-up flats that were developed in the beginning of the century, in 20th century, and they have stood the test of time, and they're very well composed with the vertical circulation being expressed quite prominently, and very few, limited number of dwellings of each landing. And these buildings are still in use and very much valued. We are also we are inspired by some of the new interventions in the area. This building just down the road shows exactly how a sort of modern intervention can sit comfortably in a conservation area, and how the sort of the mass from a taller building, I mean, on the right-hand side here, it's the building is facing the one face of it, the one that we don't see to the right-hand side, to Archway Road, and then it kind of scales down to the side street and mediates, the volume mediates with the existing house, with the scale of existing houses. Red brick, mixture of kind of other masonry elements, and retaining, in this case, there was obviously building features of value. You can see bottom left-hand side that facade is maintained, but there's a new building and new architecture to complement it. The site itself, there's been buildings on the site since the sort of beginning of 19th century, and generally small-scale residential buildings. And the Wellington Inn that stood immediately to the north is now where the petrol station is. But the 1960s kind of transport proposals for Archway Road did kind of completely change the nature of the site, and we think that the car wash sort of came soon after that. Because of the sensitivities, we've had a heritage consultant on board from the outset, advising on the scale of the buildings and relationship to buildings surrounding, and the views, prominent views that we need to consider. And generally, and of course, we've been working with the council's own conservation officer, and what is evolved is considered to be adding to the context. It's a challenging site, and the challenge really lies in noise and pollution. And whilst it's got all the other elements, making it proximity to kind of services and transport, schools, etc., it makes it useful, it makes it suitable for housing. The actual current kind of environmental conditions make it quite challenging. And that they've been, in fact, quite influential in shaping the design right from the outset. As we go up the sort of the height from the from road increases, the pollution becomes less, but the noise remains. The evolution of the design has gone through several sort of guises. We started on the sort of from left to right. We were initial sort of ideas were some houses on Archway Road and with a corner block kind of going between Archway Road and Baker Lane. That was considered inappropriate because houses are really not possibly right for this area. Okay. So what we eventually ended up, the right-hand sort of element is a sort of linear block, and the linear block in itself has gone through several evolutions, and the middle one is one the shape that the footprint that was discussed with the QRP in June, and since then there have been further iterations, and what we see on the right hand side is a footprint that more or less we are looking at now. Same with the sort of this is the same ideas in 3 dimensions, looking at the views that were selected to show the impact of it on the conservation area, how it sits in its context, and what we are looking at. We started with various elements on the top, and what we are looking at now is the row at the bottom. And the latest designs are, the latest design, in fact, is the one at right, bottom right-hand corner. Same with the elevations, the materials, always looking at sort of various combination of masonry with red brick and how the stair blocks are, stairwells are articulated. In terms of plan, at ground level, there are entrances to animate the frontages with the houses on Baker Lane, 2 wheelchair accessible flats at the center, and then the residential entrances and ancillary spaces flanking. Typical floor, the stairwell with a potential lift next to it, and every landing there are 2 flats served, and very sort of disciplined stacking plans to make it potentially suitable for some kind of a modern construction method because of the complexities of the site for traffic, kind of for construction, traffic and deliveries and so on. And the third floor is just the flats because the houses are just 2-story. On the very top floor is where we have a completely linear block with a bay that projects to one side, as you see on the bottom sort of view elevation in here. So basically, the volume from 4-story on Archway Road, stepping down to a 3-story bay at the corner, and then 2-story houses. Just showing you how we've sort of approached looking at the palette of materials for the facade, a mix of red brick, masonry elements, spandrel elements to windows that kind of look like railings, where we've got full height openings. Aerial views showing the building from different angles. It's the same building, just looking at it from different sides. Look, is showing the transition from the block of flats to the 2-story houses, and views from the from Archway Road. The rear view much calmer and simple, with houses in the background and block of flats to the left. View from further away on Archway Road looking north, and view from Archway Road looking south. From Baker Lane. And in terms of access, you know, the site is, the development is car-free, so there is one parking spot for a blue badge in a lay-by on Archway Road. There is an existing lay-by, and this is an enlarged version of it. There's been extensive consultation with TfL, and then this is accepted. Service deliveries and services would be all from vehicular access, vehicular stopping point at the lay-by.
Do you think you could start to wind up the presentation now? I think most of the points have been covered. If there's anything you just want to raise quickly, but if you could just
I don't think so. I was just going to say, it's just in terms of sustainability, we're aiming for net zero carbon, and this is the number of dwellings that we've got, and that was the end of content.
Okay, all right, good, thank you. So questions and comments. I've got Councillor Buxton, and I've got the others. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. I know it was covered briefly at the start of the presentation, but I have 2 questions, mainly about the accessibility of the site, because it is a very busy gyratory. As you say, it's coming off the A1, so although it's a 30-mile-an-hour zone for most of it, you know, there's a bit of a question about, you know, whether people have got down to 30 at that point when they should have. That's a different matter. But there are 3 crossings that I could see on that gyratory. None of them are zebra crossings or signal light or traffic lights. So for any wheelchair user, I'm saying that it's going to be very difficult for them to actually get off the site unless they are in a car, and we only have 1 blue badge parking space there. So it's kind of a 2-part question, that one. One, you know, I know we've said that that TfL have said that not much can change, but we either need to push back on that, or if we're advertising 2 wheelchair accessible houses, we've really got to think about how those residents are going to be feeling kind of trapped on this island. And then the other point is more to do with the cycling stores and kind of similar issues that there is a bike lane there. The bike lane's not protected. So again, I think, I know TfL have said nothing, but I think it is about coming back to them and actually thinking about it as a zero car scheme, which I think we approve of. But yeah, so those are the two comments. If can come back.
Thank you, Councillor. Just turning to the accessibility, to the wheelchair accessibility. I have the privilege of leading the bespoke housing programme in the council, which aims to match those on our Band A list of greatest vulnerability to the M43, the wheelchair adaptable units that we're building in our delivery programme. Generally the case that less than 50% are car users, and very often the blue badge spaces, if they're not allocated, will go to people elsewhere in the district who may be blue badge users, but not specific to the site in question. Taking on board the comments that you make, which were very similar to the comments made by the Highgate Societies when we first engaged with them, we took on board an accessibility consultant, a highly renowned accessibility consultant. He and his team have done a complete 360 on the site and take the view that the site is fully accessible for those with mobility impairments, including those who are either full or part-time wheelchair users. Their detailed report would obviously form part of the planning submission in due course and be available for interrogation and challenge. The issue regarding TfL is an interesting one. We have pushed back to TfL, rest assured. You will be familiar with the general level of success of any of us pushing back with TfL. We continue to do so, but we don't believe that any of the proposals for this site would necessarily prevent TfL being more amenable to some positive changes to that gyratory system in due course. The use of the lay-by for a blue badge space, we have negotiated with TfL a dedicated blue badge space in what is currently the lay-by. As a general rule, they will not allow allocated blue badge spaces within TfL land, but in this case they have conceded that we can allocate that one to one of our M43 units on the development.
Thank you. Okay, so I've got Councillor Dunstall, Councillor White, Councillor Corley-Harrison. So Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you. Actually, Councillor Buxton asked my question.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So Councillor White.
Thank you very much, Chair. And it's always good to see proposals for council homes being put forward, particularly where it's for 100% council homes. So it does state in the report that the proposal is for 16 new homes for council rent. Now, I'd always taken that phrase council rent to mean formula rent, or otherwise known as target rent, and I think that other members of the panel might also have, of the committee might also have taken that, but comments made by a cabinet member at a recent scrutiny panel meeting lead me to kind of be a bit more cautious about that. So I'd like some clarification as to whether, when it says council rent here, it does actually mean formula rent, and I'd also like the comments of our planning officers on what kind of weight we should be giving, whether the term council rent has a specific meaning in planning terms, and what kind of weight we should be giving the fact that a proposal, when it does come forward, says council rent rather than some other form of affordable rent when we're looking at the kind of the tenure mix and the affordability aspect. Thank you.
Shall I answer the first question, then planning officers will obviously answer the second question. Obviously, I can't comment on anything that may have been said at a scrutiny committee meeting that I wasn't at, but all of my financial appraisals for this site, all of the discussions we'd had in the team, and the entire direction for travel on this site is for social rent, target rent, not for any other form of affordable rent.
And thank you, Chair. I think in a way that answers the question, that's what we would be tying this to in the Shadow 106 agreement, that would be secured, and any other change in tenure would need to amend that. In terms of weight, that would be a decision maker's discretion, but it would be reasonable to give the greater level of affordability more weight in terms of its benefit to people. But in terms of how it's classed in our tenure guidance and our policy, it's a type of affordable rent, so it's in that sort of bracket with other ones. So there's no specific guidance that you should give it any more weight, but it comes into that sort of general area of affordable rents.
But just to be clear, and thank you for the answers. But just to be clear, when it says council rent, we're understanding that to mean formula rent.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Thank you. So I've got Councillor Corley-Harrison, then Councillor Bevan, then Councillor Say. And I do want to wrap this up within the next 10 minutes.
I don't know why you'd possibly say that before I was coming in, Barbara.
I was just going to say, Councillor, before you, but if we can just.
Yeah, I'll rush through my 10 questions.
Ask questions.
So I just wanted to ask about the parking bay. They look like they're coming into the red line to facilitate no changes to the road width. So the pavement would be on part of the site. Is that correct? And what is done about managing both the loading bay and the disabled bay, because it's TfL. TfL, I think further down, use CCTV to monitor. Would that be the case here as well? Yeah, okay. Then on pollution and noise, so specifically what measures are being brought in? Is there going to be mechanical ventilation or something like that? Are you looking at introducing something that goes beyond what you're doing on other sites that we may have had? And are what look to me like Juliet balconies, are they Juliet balconies leading out onto the road? So a little bit on that. I'm also interested on exactly how much play space is being provided versus the standards, and also outdoor space versus the standards for each of the units. And then also you showed, and also in the pack, a series of other buildings used for inspiration or nearby properties. I could see similarities between all of those and absolutely no similarity with the design that's been presented. So they all have pitched roofs, they all have detailing on the front, even the new build ones, not necessarily the old ones. The only similarity I could see with this design locally is the flat roof Georgian properties, maybe, but they have a lot more detailing. So to me, the design looks very, very basic and not in keeping at all with the area, even though I appreciate the island itself doesn't really have anything of merit. So I'm just wondering whether the design is at stage 1 and it's going to be progressed with more detailing. Should we expect more? I think there was a mock-up where you did have pitch roofs, whether there's going to be mansard roofs or something. But I would like to see more from the design because it's a really prominent location for the entrance to Haringey.
Let me just start with the question. Trying to remember the questions from the beginning. The control of the parking and loading bay, CCTV, TfL, yes. No change to the red route in that area, yes. Pollution and noise control, yes, there will be greater measures than you might expect to see on a quieter and less traffic populated site, including MVHRs and a number of other schemes that will be in a full sustainability report that will accompany the application. On the broader question of the design philosophy and its progress, there's been a great deal of work done with the council's urban design officer and the conservation officer to get us to this point. From here until the point at which we make an application, probably in the early part of the new year, the design will continue to iterate in collaboration with both of those officers, so that what eventually we present to you, we hope will be something that you'll find satisfactory. On the flat roof point, we get caught sometimes on the desire to have pitched roofs in a country where, as we can see, it tends to rain rather a lot, and our desire to meet passive house standards. The desire for climate change, the desire for passive house standards has to trump that, and therefore the flat roofs become almost a requirement in order to meet those very detailed passive house standards. All of our employers' requirements now obligate us to meet passive house standards and to carry out the testing that means that we're available for passive house certification.
Can you just pick up on the outdoor, the play space, please?
Yeah, there is an external area here where we have a landscape architect and we are working with them and designing a play area for under fives, younger children, really. Yeah.
Sorry, just for the point about compliance with standards, the landscape architect is designing the amenity space to comply with the current standards. Again, details will be configured in the application in due course.
There's no need to use the, for example, the roof for outside space or anything. It will all be on the ground floor. Okay, yeah, that's my main point, really.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. So Councillor Bevan, please.
Yeah, the designing out crime report. I'm aware that in some of your previous schemes, there's been items that, in my opinion, would have failed a designing out crime report, like letterboxes on outside walls, which is totally unacceptable. How that scheme ever got a designing out crime pass is beyond my comprehension. So I'm seeking confirmation that you will get a good grade of designing out crime and this type of thing won't happen there. And then also I'm conscious of another scheme, Rosa Luxembourg, which the director is fully aware because I submitted my observations. The design of the lobbies on that scheme were so appalling that when you entered it, you looked as if you was entering a medical surgery or operating room. Brilliant white, really difficult to maintain, loads of issues on that block. I know that was a block we didn't actually build ourselves, but I'm raising these issues for you to recollect on. There's a few questions. Will the windows be reversible so that they can be cleaned by the occupants both sides? The kitchens, will they all be kitchen diners or will there be some separate kitchens? And also the single aspect, how many single aspect properties will there be? Thank you.
Mindful of time.
Yeah, can you just, I mean, Councillor Bevan's made some comments,
You
but
have.
can you just answer the questions about this development,
Yeah,
please? You know?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Insofar
thank
as this development is concerned, Councillor, we have an absolute obligation to obtain a designing out crime good as a minimum, preferably an excellent requirement, and we work very closely with Lee Warwick and his team to do so. Take your point about the decoration of communal lobbies, and I think you'll find on our own schemes that generally is not the case. We don't have external letterboxes ever, not on schemes that we develop ourselves.
You did on Romney Close?
Yeah, that was one of the first schemes. Our current employers' requirements obligate us not to have those, although it's a conversation I'll have with you separately about the difficulties we have occasionally with the designing out crime officer on exactly that point.
Okay, thank you. I think Councillor Bevan's made some interesting comments. I'm sure that you will take them on board. Councillor Say, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I find it really depressing that council tenants have to live on Traffic Island. Can you tell me what sort of health and safety things you're going to deal with the pollution? It's been recognised that traffic pollution kills people.
We have had some very detailed scientific research done by experts in their field, and presented with the application will be the results of that research, which will demonstrate that the use of mechanical ventilation and other means on the site make the scheme no more or less traffic or pollution unfriendly than any other scheme in an urban area. Zeba may want to comment on the design so that the principal rooms are facing into the garden area and not onto Archway Road, quite deliberately.
There are no living rooms or bedrooms that have opening windows to the street facade. They're all facing, I mean, that was one of the things that determined, if you look at that plan, all the, I'll go to a typical floor if you wish, but all the rooms are facing south away from the street. And there are the windows, any windows on the street are actually for purge. So if you want it for cleaning and so on, you can open the window, but you're not relying on those for ventilation. You're not.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bevan, can you switch off your microphone, please? Thank you. Okay, I'm going to bring this to a conclusion now. So thank you very much to the applicants and to the officer. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Councillors, there is a model there of the Beryl Quarter, if you want to go and have a look at it.
Situation.
Okay, thank you. So we're now on to item 9. Okay, we'll just give another minute for all of the councillors to be in their seat. Not mentioning any names, but the vice chair's gone walkabout. So 1 more minute. Okay. Can you take your seat, Councillor Rice, please? I said, could you take your seat, please? Right, thank you. Okay, so we're now on to item 9, and that's the Beryl Quarter, Beryl Yard on Ashley Road, and that is pages 113 to 160 in the pack. So I'm going to ask Philip Elliott, who's the planning officer, to introduce the report, please. Over to you, Philip. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So let me just go to the next slide. So the application site is near to Tottenham Hale Station, within and adjacent to the emerging district centre. It's flanked to the east by Watermead Way with the railway line, Hale Village, Hale Wharf and the Lee Valley beyond. To the west, it is flanked by Ashley Road with Down Lane Park further to the east and northeast. The site forms part of site allocation TH6, the Ashley Road South employment area. TH6 is one of several allocated sites in and around the district centre that have permission for redevelopment, many of which are now under construction or have been constructed. This includes TH6, Ashley Road South, which has 3 separate planning permissions covering the allocation. These include Cannon Factory and Ashley House, proposed by Notting Hill Genesis to the northeastern and southwestern parts of the site allocation. Ashley Gardens to the western side of Ashley Road, which includes the constructed Rosa Luxembourg apartments and the soon to be finished Cecile. And lastly, Beryl Yard, for which hybrid permission was granted in 2018 for the outline retention and extension of Beryl House to include commercial uses and 18 apartments above, and full permission for 2 buildings, one of which has been constructed, the Gessner, and a 7,000 square metre educational building intended for ADA, the National College for Digital Skills. Ashley Gardens and the Gessner have been delivered by the applicant here tonight. Reserved matters approval for the detailed design of Beryl House was granted in March 2020, but the works have not been progressed and the college site remains undeveloped. The proposed operator of the college, ADA, was unable to finance and deliver the college and pulled out of the contract to provide the facility. So the current proposal seeks to bring forward commercial floor space in a refurbished and extended Beryl House. with 210 build-to-rent homes in a building at a range of heights between 6 and 31 stories. So that's just an introduction. Over to the applicants. Thank you.
Okay, so the applicants to present the report, I'm going to give you 15 minutes. Thank you.
There we are. Evening, Chair, members. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm Ben Kelway from Lichfields Planning Consultants, joined at the table here by colleagues from Berkeley Square Developments, Allies and Morrison Architects, and John McCaslin and Partners Architects. We're here to present to you this evening the emerging proposals, pre-application proposals for the Beryl Quarter scheme, which is one of the remaining residual undeveloped plots within the Ashley Road South Master Plan in Tottenham Hale. So in terms of the structure of the presentation today, I'll provide a brief introduction. Paul is then going to talk through the community and commercial and place shaping objectives for the Beryl Quarter development. We'll then take you through 2 Beryl Yard, which is our mixed use residential housing led building. Beryl House, the local heritage asset, which is being restored and extended at the heart of the proposals, and then we'll end with a summary of the benefits. There's a slight lag, apologies. So in terms of the location of the site, as you can see on the slide, this is a very important location at the nexus of these intersecting routes, very close to Tottenham Hale Station, adjacent to Down Lane Park, and sitting on this very important prospective east-west green link connecting Tottenham High Road with the marshes, green spaces and the waterways of the Lee Valley. So the next slide illustrates the site forms, as I've mentioned, one of the remaining plots, undeveloped plots within the Ashley Road South Master Plan, which is the master plan edged in orange on the slide, and our site is the site edged in red, which comprises Beryl House and the site of 2 Beryl Yard. And as you can see in a bit more detail, this is identical to the slide that the officers shared. And the 3 main components of the scheme are obviously Beryl House by John McCaslin and Partners, 2 Beryl Yard by Allies and Morrison, and then the public realm and landscaping works by Churchman Thornhill Finch, which really bring together the proposals. And then finally from me, this emerging proposal is really the culmination of a really inclusive and responsive pre-application process. We've had a number of pre-application meetings with officers. We've had 2 quality review panel sessions. We've had a DM forum session, and we've obviously met with members of the public. And the quotes on the slide just captures some of the key salient points in terms of the principles of the development, the support for housing-led scheme, the support for the proposed works to Beryl House, the sensitive restoration extension of Beryl House, the fact that the quality review panel and the committee report have identified the emerging proposals as exemplary architecture, and obviously helpfully the point at the bottom that in the recent quality review panel presentation, like officers, the panel recognised that this site is appropriate for a taller building of the scale and character that we're proposing.
Good evening, Chair and members. Thank you for having us this evening. My name is Paul Honegroff. I'm sort of a creative director, creative navigator for the Berkeley Square Development Company. This is, in fact, a conversation about architecture and built form and urban planning, but it's even more so as that community at Tottenham Hale, north of the station, eventually south of the station, and along to the marshes grows. It's a whole new community, and that community has a sense of. Oh, there we go. It has a greater influence than just the sites on which we work. It's from the depot site, which you are developing at the very top of Down Lane Park, to the 6 months, I've been working with the Down Lane Park Community Design Group to try to reposition that and grow that and understand more about how that's used. And then we look at the site that we're talking about, and we look at a little closer at the developments. It's multi-development. It's got Notting Hill as a developer. It's got Berkeley Square as a developer. It's got the sorry. Argent related, I'm sorry, that slipped. But when you take them all together as responsible parties for the sense of creating community, and if you look at the plan, the red spaces on that plan are the ground plane commercial spaces. So we have to look at those collectively and curate those wholly as one, working together as a pair. And the way in which we do that is we recognize that they all really just kind of gently and quietly and appropriately focus on Barrel House. So Barrel House sits at the very center. And if you can imagine wrapping Barrel House in a great plain of public realm with great landscaping where traffic slows, where the life and the lifeblood of this community, both of this development area, but also up to the north of the park and across to the west and the east as it connects to the marshes and back to the high road, it suddenly has a certain vitality to it. And so what we're doing is we're looking at that because it's a great deal of residential, new residential, a growing residential community, both this site as well as the near in. And the fact that our lives changed quite a bit in the last couple of years with greater working from home, greater agility, more sense of localism, more sense of proximity. As we started looking at, without going into brands or anything, the way in which these things behave at the ground plane. There are the necessary things. We know what they're all about. It's about servicing. It's about answering a need. It's about answering a convenience. Wellness and well-being has never, ever been any higher on our agenda than it is today. Lifestyle is really important because typically, historically, people would live near Tottenham Hale Station because they could get down into the heart of London in a snap. Well, now they're living in that area because they've got the water, the marshes, they've got Tottenham High Street, they've got the high road, they've got, you know, the activity and the community growing. So there's a lifestyle that's resident there, and how can we build on that? So we just start to look at a little bit at categories of uses that we think would be enlivening to that. And we view this as local. We don't view this as multiple. We look at, we will search to find the new, the young, the fresh, the exciting, and that draws lifestyle and activity to us. And so when you map these uses on that site, again, you start to see that barrel itself at the center becomes almost the energy giver to that space, and everything around it brings it life. So one of the things that we've made a point of working with Aidan and the John McCaslin team is that barrel has to be permeable at the base. I don't want one side of the street to be front and the other side back. I want both sides in balance, whether they're our property or not. I want it full of life and engagement and a bit of a lovely place to be because they're living and working there. So we developed two strategies. There's one where the uses are just a little larger, but there is permeability, and then there's office on the upper levels as you rise up. But you start to see how that whole square is wrapped by commercial activity. And then if you look down to the lower right, you can see the little green spot, and Paul will talk about that a little later, adding to the community, talking to a Made by Tottenham and bringing them into it. So the whole concept of bringing into Barrel creators, makers, creative industry. So not only the ground floor is activated by jobs that are important to and from this community, so are the upper floors. And then we might just look at taking it a little bit more granular, a little tinier, smaller, turnover, grow them quicker, enhance the community with some very, very local and impressive businesses that give it life. And then above that, studios. We went to the archive just on south of our site recently, and to see the fascinating businesses that are growing in that community very near this site, and to think that we can position something of this nature, that when we finally get it built and finally get it going, it's something that will have a great deal of give back to the community that we're a member of, and try to make it something very, very special. That's me. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. My name's Paul Eaton from Allies and Morrison. I'm going to describe initially some aspects of our sustainability strategy. And this is for the whole development. In summary, we're achieving a 67% carbon reduction over 2013 building regs by following the GLA hierarchy. Some observations: no basement in the tower. Basements are very carbon hungry. We've worked really hard to reduce that. Very balanced glazing ratios. We've all been through many hot summers in dwellings, and that's very, very important for energy consumption. And the refurbishment of Beryl House itself is an important reuse of an historic building, and therefore reusing carbon that's already there. We're incorporating the use of recycled materials where possible, connecting to the district heat network, installing PV panels, and as you'll see, are really considering shading, external shading on the buildings to Beryl Yard. The building lies at quite an interesting point in Tottenham. It's on what we call an intersection on the active travel network. That's cycle and pedestrian routes rather than all the busy car routes that are around there. Zooming in on that a little bit, you can see there the site lies at this crossing of the Green Link, this important valley crossing link, and Ashley Road, a community street linking the centre of Tottenham with Down Lane Park. We've avoided the underground and therefore minimised expensive foundations. We've pulled away from the Gesner building, providing sunlight and views to all of the buildings around. And we've opened up permeability through the site. The building plan, as you'll see, has seen from the model, has a fragmented form. It's one building, but made of these 5 different forms, and that enables us to react and respond to the local setting. This is the last piece, and therefore we are able to be very specific about the architecture. So in a way, it's these 5 forms coming together around a core to produce a single building, but a single building that is stepped and articulated, producing a rich silhouette and up to 7 roof terraces. Here's a view of the building in its context. Because it's the last piece, we're able to make direct relationships with the many, many buildings around and all of the richness of their architecture, for example, through height datums. Here we are relating to lower levels, to these mid levels, and critically too, forming part of this higher group of tall buildings that together come together to describe the very centre of this whole regeneration area, one of the most important transport nodes in this part of London. The site lies on the Green Link. We think this is something that your committee should advocate for at every opportunity. It's such an important east-west connector, linking, of course, the Lee Valley with the High Road and many things between. And some good progress has been made on links along that route, but there are, of course, some missing links. Our proposal enables one of the bridges, the bridge over Watermead Way, to happen. It produces its lift and stair and its foundational landing point. This is a little video, but because of time, I'm going to skip through and we can return to that at the end if need be. Our colleagues at Churchman have been working on the landscape to support not only an incredibly green place, but an incredibly vital town centre of the nature that Paul has described to support all of those uses. Careful consideration of vehicle movements and drop-offs has produced what we think is a highly permeable environment for cyclists and pedestrians. The ground floor produces retail frontages not only facing Beryl House and animating Beryl Square, but also Watermead Way and the approach from the station to the south. Here's a view then arriving at Beryl Square, and you can see the Green Link continuing beyond. You can just pick up, actually in this view, the stair that would bring you onto Future Bridge and the busy retail. Here we are moving slightly closer to one of the lower forms of the building. We've described there where the upper floor community space is at the landing of the bridge. Here's a first floor plan. There's the community space and the Future Bridge connecting into that. And our colleagues at Berkeley Square have been discussing the possibility of this taking this space with many people like Made by Tottenham. We're very interested in the way that this can be a genuine catalyst for not only this part of Tottenham. Here's some indicative views of the community space looking out towards a Future Bridge at the top of the stair. It's about 1,300 square feet, that space. Here's a view as you approach from the station, the way that this building signals movement into this revitalized commercial cluster, but also is designed for the Future Bridge to make that critical connection across Watermead Way and one of those missing links all the way to the Lee Valley, as shown in this view. The building is incredibly safe from a fire point of view. It has 2 cores in essence, 2 lift and stair cores, and that's very important. Equally, the homes are very good quality. 2/3 of the flats are 100% dual aspect. The remaining are single aspect with no north facing single aspect and deep recessed balconies bringing light in to even the single aspect flats. We've all spent time at homes and we've overheated and we've moved desks around rooms trying to work from home, and we've thought really hard about the way these windows work. We have raised sills so that the rooms are very flexible, and we have external shading to windows that need it, so that some windows are like this, very simple. Some have external shading that's just horizontal. Some have critical vertical shading, and we manipulate and adjust that shading depending on the solar radiation of each specific piece of the building. So each window is carefully designed for its orientation. Equally, because we're last, we're able to borrow the language and bricks and materials from all of the buildings around. This building is a little bit of a collector in that regard. So we have a tone, a palette of bricks, including one green hue, which come together to form a distinctive, coherent form, but one that as you move around it, changes its identity. The windows, though, that rhythm of windows, that rhythm of deep balconies are common throughout. Here's a view looking over the community space and down into the square. We have 7 roof terraces. Those are green roofs. They're full of PV and they have amenity space for residents. And then a landscape plan showing some of the most important parts of this. I'm conscious that.
Okay, can you wind up? You've had your. Can you wind up?
Yeah,
please?
yes.
Yeah. Right, last few comments, please.
A very quick resume on Beryl House. I think it's fantastic that a building that was built in 1907 can still be at the heart and the future of this extraordinarily important master plan. Beryl House is a magnificent heritage building, wonderful detailing, all of which our intention is to retain. But fundamentally, we wish to kind of create a building which is permeable at the ground floor. This building is 100 meters long and in many regards does present, for all its glory, an impenetrable wall separating the east from the west of Ashley Road. The concept is simple in terms of its organization. We're proposing to add 3 more floors, 2 full floors and 1 reduced floor to the existing building. We're proposing to reorganize the ground floor of the building to provide a reorganized lobby, a public right-of-way through the building at the center point, and flexible retail accommodation to the ground floor accommodation. We hope to show you a sympathetic but confident modern addition to the top of this important building. And we also have a fundamental concern for the treatment of the elevation of the roof, which is significantly looked down upon by the adjacent new developments, the 5th elevation, as we call it. The building, the ambition for this building is to create an iconic destination, an iconic workplace, an exemplar of the modern workplace within the reconceived historic shell of the existing building. And lastly, but fundamentally, of course, the retention of any building is a big plus in terms of its sustainable performance, but we're trying to make a holistic concept for this building in terms of the performance of the amalgamation of the new and existing elements of the building.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So do we have any questions from the committee, please? So Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, Beryl House. I think you've been advised that I've got a picture from the museum archives showing the original windows.
Can I just, yes, so you've all got a copy of the picture. The applicants have no objection to this being introduced, I understand. So if
and
you
although the existing windows didn't look too bad on that picture, they are actually appalling. They're plastic double glaze put in with no character at all. So I'm just hoping that you'll be able to restore the windows on that whole block to something like the original, which I'm sure will improve your sale values. I'm a bit concerned about build to rent because the quality review panel says that this scheme will be mitigated by the provision of the bridge. And I'm a bit concerned about the financial aspects of build to rent because I think we've had bad experiences in Haringey where those schemes haven't actually worked out for the developer. That's just an observation. And that's that point. And there's a couple of other points, sorry. Oh yeah, and one final point. you talk about this area being really important, all the tower blocks. I'm a bit concerned about the different colours and designs that are going up on this site, and yours is one of the last ones. I would hope that we could get some, I think uniformity rather than contrast would be appropriate at this location, because we want it all to gel together as far as possible. That's my opinion as a design champion. And then one question I'd like to ask you lastly, is it your intention to use Haringey's Building Control Service on this development?
Good evening, Jonathan Carkeep, Berkeley Square Developments. I'll answer two of those questions. In terms of the Haringey Building Control, that is something we have been using during the delivery of the other schemes, so I'm sure it's something we'll continue to do. In terms of the build to rent, that is something at the moment which has proved very attractive in Tottenham Hale. We're finding that there's a lot of interest in that product, but I understand your comments, but Tottenham certainly seems very appealing for that.
Thank you very much for taking the time to find this wonderful picture. Obviously, we will replace all the windows, which are rather ghastly modern additions, but we'll look very carefully, have looked very carefully at the grain and the detail of the existing windows in the formulation and design of the new windows to a kind of contemporary thermal performance and specification, as shown on the illustration on the screen. So we will look very carefully at these and other heritage pictures and see if we can find the best alignment between the new and the old to significantly improve the visual performance of the windows from the existing rather poor condition they have at the moment.
Okay, thank you. And the other comments about the schemes not working out, the uniformity, were just observations, so I won't ask you to comment on those. Councillor Rice, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm concerned that all the developments going up around the site, the names given to buildings got nothing to do with local people. Barrow is all right, but some other buildings around Tottenham Hale, there's no, the name given. Who is Rosa Luxemburg? Nobody ever heard about him. Heard Tottenham. I'm not sure whether it's one of your sites or somebody else's, but you know, why not name thing after Jimmy Greaves, for instance, or Bill Nicholson, someone like that who the Tottenham community knows, and is some relevance. No. The initial plan for this Barrow site was a digital university. Have you given up on that idea now? That's not going to run, is it?
I think the name Rosa Luxemburg, if I'm correct, was chosen by the council. I don't think that was chosen.
Which council? Not Haringey.
It was chosen by the council, so I don't expect you to address that. If you can just address the second point. What's your second?
Good evening. In terms of the college question, I think we share officers' disappointment that Ada was ultimately not delivered. We obviously worked very closely with officers and the GLA and indeed the Department for Education to try and find a way to fund Ada and deliver their scheme. We offered to build their building for them, but unfortunately their funding wouldn't allow it. We gave them over a further year to try and fund their scheme. They designed it. It was to their budget. It was to their requirements, not to ours. And fundamentally, we wanted it to succeed. We have built offices and provided incubator space for that. We then have appointed Knight Frank and marketed the site for academic use for over 32 months. And unfortunately, there just hasn't been the appetite for academic use. We more recently also appointed Knight Frank to market to the science and technology industries, and we sought support from the UK Innovation Corridor, but regretfully, the site, its location was just not something which was appealing.
Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. On Barrow House, I think the design of Barrow House looks really good. I think I like what you've done with the extra stories. I think it works well. The colour in the pack kind of looks like sherbet, and the colour here kind of looks like pink. Is it just it's being kept as it is, basically? Yeah, right. And then the extension is red brick, is it, or? Oh, right. Okay, fine. I'm wondering why on the tower blocks you took inspiration. To me, you took inspiration from the other tower blocks on the island, in the village, rather than taking design inspiration from Beryl House.
Thank you. I moved quite quickly actually through those slides, so I might just pause a little bit on that. All of our window detailing has been carefully thought through and discussed with John McCaslin and partners, because we like the way that there's a kind of industrial quality to the metalwork. And so if you see both buildings, actually, we're using exactly the same colored metal and all of these fine crystal like window lines. So that's been quite important. And then in picking the different colors as we move around this, we've made a specific, we've very deliberately matched and aligned the colors in the part of this building that sits opposite Beryl House. So that's a very direct recognition of what we'd have been able to make. We did look at then using that same color all the way around, but we'd felt that because this was the last piece, as it were, there was an opportunity to do that on all sides and in all views, so it felt richer in the end to then go and produce more colors. But there are very direct and strong relationships between the tower and this building, which we've been enjoying throughout. It's a good question. Thank you.
Councillor Warren.
Thank you. Just on 2 Beryl Yard, there's obviously going to be a mixture of types of housing in there, including 35% affordable. Could you just clarify in terms of any communal spaces that's going to be accessible by all residents? It won't be kind of segregated. And also, do you have a plan for kind of, will it sort of generally be blended in terms of the split, or are there plans for where to place each type of housing? Thank you.
Thank you. All of the all the spaces within the building will be accessible by all. There's 2 aspects to that. One is, can you physically get there in a wheelchair and with a pushchair, and that's important. But equally, irrespective of tenure or where your flat is, it's quite important for the communities in these buildings that they're all shared, we think.
And the other point, obviously, is community space that we're really excited by. It's something which we feel really passionate about, and the idea, and we're working closely with colleagues at Made by Tottenham to have this fantastic community space that overlooks the square, and we're offering public art space in the square. And we have this idea in our minds about Made by Tottenham and using it as this great facility where you could, as like an incubator space for local creators and traders, and then perhaps they can use it to show their art, their trade, but also then that links back to what my colleague Paul was saying about what goes on the ground floor of Beryl House, and you might be able to grow into those spaces. And for us, when you come out of the station, you will see this building, and that will be the first thing you see is the Made by Tottenham, and we think that's an amazing opportunity to really help grow the neighbourhood.
Councillor Buxton.
Thank you, Chair. So mine is, I guess, a general question, which is not only directed to you as developers, but it does kind of play into the whole scheme, and it might be also something to direct to officers to think about, or perhaps it's just another venture that someone can pursue later on. There is a large influx of population here, and you did speak about wellness and all of those good things, and there's green space and things like this. But I've raised it before at planning meetings that wellness isn't just about going into green spaces, and with the massive change of population there is the parks, but specifically sporting facilities, and I'm not just talking about gyms, because gyms can be a bit of a hellhole. You know, football pitches, tennis courts, fives courts if we want to go to Highgate School as well. But, you know, those are important parts of a community. And I know in some parts of the borough, we have a high density of sports clubs, sports facilities, and accessible stuff. So it might not just be on your development, it might be the whole project, but I do think that that is very important to think about in terms of just the well-being of the entire community and what thoughts you have on that.
it's a very, very, very important point. And wellness and well-being happens on so many different levels. It's wellness and well-being can be just being sure I can sit in the sunshine, and that is the place to sit, and that it's fresh and it's clear. I think all of the terraces and things that are being designed into the towers and other things are very much an element of that. The public realm and landscaping, I sort of rattled through mine, but the idea of making that public realm a place to be sought out and a place to have. And then finally, it's my pleasure for working on the Down Lane Park redesign. We're now doing stakeholder work with all of the sporting teams and sporting groups, basketball, tennis, football, multi-games canopies, gym sets around the park. So it is a park redesign for the landscape point, but it's also for this whole community, a fitness and wellness centered strategy. So I think we will do everything we can from our development to promote that, and then also help to support it happening in Down Lane Park.
Okay, thank you very much. So I want to bring this to a close. Go on then, Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Last question.
Quickly,
I thought that
please.
John was going to ask it, but he
Quickly,
didn't.
please, quickly.
Yeah, it's on north-facing single aspects, John. You mentioned that there's 33% single aspects as it stands. So I'd like to know whether you think that's going to come down or you think that's going to be what's coming forward. And then there's reference to you having northeastern facing of those single aspects. So I'd like to know how many are northeastern facing, because you make a distinction between north and northeastern, but we know that sometimes there can be little distinction in reality. So I'd like to know of that, what the difference is.
I'm looking over at my colleague to see if she's got the exact number. Do you have that, Angie? We don't have that to hand. I'm sorry, Councillor, that exact number.
That's right. I think that might be a point of interrogation were you to bring it forward. So.
Okay, thank you very much for that. You're right that the units are northeast facing. That means that they gain a morning sun, of course, at the equinox and beyond. What matters here is what visible sky they have as well. And of course, because we're able to rise higher and we've pulled away from buildings on the other side of Watermead Way, those units will enjoy that, the sun that they do get, they'll enjoy that throughout the year when it's available. So that we think that's a very positive thing. We will be able to go into more detail in our design and access statement about how we're enhancing the quality of those, all units, in fact, with no bolt-on balconies, but deep recessed balcony rooms. And they don't count, strictly speaking, as dual aspect, and that's quite right. But what they do provide is a greater level of windows that do enjoy different aspects in a unit. So they fall slightly under that dual aspect threshold. We describe them as enhanced, but we haven't made a claim that they're dual aspect. So in qualitative terms, we believe it will feel better than the 2/3 dual aspect. But of course, the number of northeast facing will draw a committee's attention to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yep, that's it. Okay, so thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you. Okay, so moving on then, we're on item 10, which is update on major proposals. This is to note, are there any questions?
Where the proposals then?
Noted, thank you. Right, there are no, item 11, new items of urgent business. There are no new items of urgent business. And so the date of the next meeting is the 29th of November. So thank you very much, everyone. And this meeting is now closed. Thank you.